I, Chair Travis Argy, call the live virtual State Plumbing Board meeting of February 17th, 2022 to order at 9:31. Would you please do the roll call, Debbie?
Yes, sir. Chairman Travis Argy.
Here.
Vice Chair Matt Roselle is excused. Craig Anderson.
Here.
Corey Fraser.
Here.
Melissa Getz. Melissa Getz. We'll come back to Melissa. Molly Keller. Molly Keller. Molly, your mic is not on. Okay, I see you waving. Thank you. And Joe Liebold. I don't see that Joe is on quite yet, but we can do another check around here in just one moment if we could, Mr. Chair. But we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the approval of the agenda. If there are any questions, if they have any questions to change the agenda, okay. I Chair Argy. No, is there any questions to the agenda? Sorry, kind of stumbling through this today. Hearing none, I Chair Argy rule the agenda of order of business approved to include the late submission of the removal of item I-1F. Okay. Is there any changes to the draft meeting minutes? All right, seeing none, I Chair Argy rule the draft meeting minutes of December 16th, 2021 are final. The date of the next plumbing board meeting will be April 21 of 2022. All right. Next up is Mr. Andy Boulton. Will you address the public comments? Is there any?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andy Boulton, policy analyst, or excuse me, senior policy advisor with the division. We did not receive any requests for general public comment for this meeting. I would like to hold the line open for just a moment here, just in case there's someone on the line that did not request general public comment, but would still like to provide some. And so we'll do that right now. Just really quickly, if you are on the line and you would like to provide general public comment to the board, go ahead and speak up now, identify yourself and who, if anyone, you represent. Okay, hearing none. It's back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Andy. Next up is the agenda reports. So will Megan please review these cases?
Yes, good morning, Chair Argy, members of the board. For the record, Megan Sachet-Rung, contested case representative for the division. Agenda through the chair, agenda item 3A. Before the board is a summary of consent orders that were recently negotiated by the division on the board's behalf prior to hearing, a settlement prior to hearing. We have entered into 2 consent agreements since our last board meeting. All settlements, including the amount owed and suspended civil penalties, fall within the guidelines of the penalty matrix, and they contain the standard conditions. Board action is required on these 2 cases. And again, they're pretty standard. I'll give a brief overview, but I am available to answer any questions you have regarding these. And then if the board could approve or deny these consent orders, either as a whole or parts of it, then that is required. So the first consent order is for Rivercast Customer Modeling, LLC, case number C-2020-0144. This was prior to the enforcement sending 2 separate notices before the boards. So there is $8,000 total in civil penalties, $4,000 for the plumbing board, and then $4,000 for the electrical board violations. And there was installation of water lines, toilet, and a shower in Beaverton or Portland, Oregon area, I believe. And the company was engaging in plumbing without a plumbing permit and engaging in a business of being a plumbing contractor without a valid plumbing contractor license. The second consent order that we entered into was the 2020-0150 for Jose Rivera Ramiro. It's a related case to Rivercast. And in this one, same thing. There were both plumbing and electrical violations. There are 4,000 penalties for the plumbing violations, which included, $2,000 in violations for the plumbing violations, because there was the installation of water lines, toilet, and a shower, and this individual was engaging in plumbing at the property without a valid plumber license, Journeyman plumber license. So if the board has any questions on those, I am available to answer.
All right. Would anybody have any questions, or do you guys feel comfortable with what was explained to us? All right. Hearing none. We need to make a motion on this. Would someone like to step forward for a motion?
Craig Anderson, through the chair, would like to make a motion to issue the final orders adopting the proposed orders for both cases.
Okay. There's been a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, I'd like to have Debbie do the roll, please.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Joe LeBold. Joe Liebold. Still not connected. Molly Keller. Thank you, Molly. Melissa Getz. She's
Can you guys
having
hear me?
problems. Yes, thank you, Melissa.
All right,
Okay,
thanks.
great. And Melissa, how do you vote on the compliance case? We're on
In favor.
3A. For the consent orders?
Yeah, a yes for me.
Okay, they've been all asked for final orders. Okay, that's yes for Melissa. Corey Fraser,
Aye.
Craig Anderson,
Aye.
and Chair Travis Argue.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay. Thank you. Next, we'll go back to Megan again for the review of summary cases.
Through the chair, agenda item 3B. Before the board are 5 default orders. No action is required by the board on these. However, I am available if you have any questions. I'll just give you a brief run through. So we have A&E Heating and Air. They performed rough-in plumbing at a residence in Hood River, and they allowed unlicensed individuals to perform plumbing work. Then we have Rafael Oriana. There was installation of a drain, pipe, and water supply, a new shower, so along with some other water lines and a shower pan. No Journeyman plumber's license, and this happened in Beaverton. Connected case is PDX Top Finishes LLC. They were allowing the unlicensed individuals to perform the installation of those drain pipes and water supplies in Beaverton, and they had no plumbing contractor's license or plumbing permit. Then there's Flip It Right Construction. There was an installation of PEX hot and cold water supply lines. They allowed unlicensed individuals to perform plumbing work, did not have a plumbing contractor's license or a plumbing permit in Salem. And last but not least is Charlie William Yancey IV. There was installation and alter of potable water pipes and drain pipes. There was allowing unlicensed individuals to perform plumbing work, no plumbing contractor's license, and no plumbing permit in Myrtle Point. Again, these don't need action by the board, but I can answer any questions if you have them.
Does anybody have any questions for Megan? Okay. I'm glad to see our enforcement is working. Next up is Yeah. Plumbing program update with Mr. Andy Skinner.
Thank you, Chair Argy, members of the board. For the record, my name is Andy Skinner. I'm the Plumbing Program Chief for the State of Oregon Building Codes Division. I have a couple things for the update today. First, I would like to focus on, we have some internal position changes. We have Todd Smith, who was our interim enforcement manager, has accepted the policy and technical services manager position. So he is actually currently out on leave right now, but will be back. And when he's back, he'll be the PTS manager. We have Julia Heyer, who was our senior policy advisor. She has accepted the enforcement manager position. So she's moving into enforcement. And then we have our own Andy Boulton, who mentioned this morning that he's no longer the policy analyst. He is now the senior policy advisor. So I'd like to welcome all those to their new position, everybody their new position. Second, I wanted to talk about some confusion out in the industry. Last year, the Oregon Department of Energy came to the board to try to give some clarity on Bill 2062. This was our energy efficiency fixture standards for selling of fixtures within the state of Oregon. The division has been receiving quite a few phone calls specifically from suppliers out there. So what I wanted to do today is hopefully give some clarity and talk about kind of the transition of what the code and what this House bill is. So this Senate bill or House Bill 2062 was the bill that establishes standards for fixtures that can be sold in Oregon. Of course, our code is for the minimum installation standards. But there has been some confusion because the code states 2.0 for shower heads specifically, and 2062 states 1.8 for shower heads in Oregon. So I think really the meat and potatoes of this is the start or the manufacturing date of the product. So what the bill stated was that manufacturers that are manufacturing shower heads after January 1st of 2022 have to meet the 1.8 to be bought in Oregon. Anything manufactured before January 2022 can still be the 2.0. They can still ship to Oregon 2.0 that was manufactured before January 1st. Supply houses can still sell those products that were manufactured before January 1st of 2022 that meet the 2.0 shower head gallons per minute. And then anything currently in Oregon that is still on the shelves that is the 2.0 shower head can be sold after January 1st as long as they were manufactured before that January 1st, 2022. So I kind of just wanted to get some clarity there. Hopefully that will help the manufacturers out there and also the supply houses to understand that you can still sell the 2.0 shower heads. It is code as long as they were manufactured before January 1st of 2022. And for those manufacturers, you can still ship your products to Oregon and that shower head at 2.0 as long as it was manufactured before January 1st of 2022. And this was really to help with that transition. I kind of like to use as an example the same issue we've had with the water closets. The 1.6 is still allowed in code, but manufacturers really ain't manufacturing 1.6 water closets anymore. They're manufacturing 1.28. So it boils down to what's available, but I just kind of wanted to make that clear. And that's about all I have today. Is there any questions on that this morning?
I have none. Does any of the other members have any? Okay. We'll move on then.
All right. Thank you, Chair Argy. Thank you, board members.
Thank you, Andy. Next agenda is communications. Mr. Chief Skinner is back up again.
Thank you, Chair Argy, members of the board. For the record, my name is Andy Skinner, Plumbing Program Chief, State of Oregon Building Codes Division. What the board has before them today is an interpretation for Code Section 309.5 for dead legs. Really, just the two main purposes of this interpretation is to clarify the distance allowed before a branch line becomes a dead leg in a potable water system. And also the other clarification is to state what is allowed to be considered a flushing device once that branch line does become a dead leg. And those two items hopefully are explained clearly in this interpretation. I would be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I don't have any questions, but I do have a statement. I think this is something that should have been probably looked at a long time ago, but I'm glad it's here. Is there anybody else on the board that has anything to say? All right, hearing none. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I second that, Chair Argue. I was just thinking that that was a great interpretation, and it's been a question for quite some time. So, and it's written really well, so it seems easy to understand. So I appreciate that too.
All right, thank you, Melissa. All right, so we're going to move on to the BTCS field services. Let's see, that's not really going to do anything there, is it? Okay, we'll move on again. Next up is agenda item 7 with Mr. Andy Boulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andy Boulton, Senior Policy Advisor with the Division. At the Board's October 21st, 2021 meeting, the Board requested that the Division review the rules listing requirements for applicants to sit for the Journeyman Plumber license examination. The Board suggested the Division consider potential rule amendments that would recognize alternate means of academic training than the traditional 4-year apprenticeship model, and alternate more extensive on-the-job training requirements that could stand in for academic training requirements. The draft amendments to OAR 918-695-0030 are included in your board packet and are proposed by the division in response to the board's request. There are some changes to the language to improve clarity and to bring the language more in line with the rest of the rules. The main substantive changes to the rules are changing the academic training requirements from 4 years at 144 hours per year to a flat total requirement of 576 total hours. And adding an alternative path to qualify to sit for the Journeyman Plumber's license examination. This path would not require a minimum amount of academic training, but would require double the amount of on-the-job experience working with a license that includes the scope of work of the Oregon Journeyman Plumber's license. The division welcomes any discussion or input from the board on the proposed rulemaking. In particular, the division seeks board recommendations on whether the rule changes will have any particular fiscal or economic impact on either housing costs, the general public, businesses, or local government. If so, the division would like to understand the extent and nature of that impact. The proposed rule amendment, again, is available in your board packet, and this item will require a motion. And we have Andy Skinner as well here in case there's any other technical questions.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board members?
I have a
Okay,
question,
hearing none.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Sorry for the delay. I think there might be a little bit of a delay. When I was reading this, we're allowing for the addition of hours instead of looking towards an apprenticeship if somebody's coming from out of state. I'm curious, the language that says under a license that includes the scope of work of an Oregon Journeyman Plumber, are you meaning that those who are coming in, say from out of state, need to provide documentation that shows that they've worked under a person with a journeyman license? Is that correct?
Andy, would you like to answer that, please?
Through the chair, this is Andy Skinner, Plumbing Program Chief, Oregon Building Codes Division. The reason for the language there is hopefully to clarify that anybody that is requesting this path would have an equivalency to an Oregon Journeyman license, not just working under. Now, if they worked under somebody for an approved apprenticeship in another state, that could also count within those hours. But the term there is really to specify that those hours required in rule for commercial and residential under a license has to be verified. Does that help, Melissa?
Yeah, so they'll, if they are requesting that, going the route of having double the hours, then they would bring in documentation showing how they accumulated those hours and experience, and it would be then reviewed by the by BCD.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Anybody else? I have one question, Andy, and I'm sorry for bringing it up right here, but when we go into the 0030 paragraph, and it mentions this as electricians, is that where we're going to add? Are we going to just take away except for plumber, or how does that verbiage? Do you foresee that verbiage being written out?
Okay. As it stands now, the language for double the hours for journeyman plumber equivalency is in 918-695. We're not going to adjust 030 because we might have had to pull in the electrical board to change that because it's specific to the electrical board. So we did it in 695 specifically, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay, it does. I was just curious how that was going to happen. So, all right. Is there any other questions for anybody? Okay, so this does require a motion, and I will make the motion. I make a motion to provide input on rulemaking and any fiscal impacts, approve the proposed rules, and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption. There's been a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. Debbie, will you do the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Molly Keller. Molly Keller. I believe she's saying yes.
Yes, she
Melissa
is.
Getz.
Aye.
Thank you, Melissa. Corey Fraser.
Aye.
Thank you. Craig Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you, Craig. And Chair Travis Argue.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. All right. Mr. Andy Boulton, will you, let's see, approve the committee recommendations on continuing education, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andy Boulton, Senior Policy Advisor with the division. In January, the CE committee reviewed 12 applications from 3 organizations. 3 courses were recommended for approval and 5 courses were not recommended for approval. 2 instructors were recommended for approval and 2 instructors were not recommended for approval. The applications are detailed in the matrix in your board packet you need to review, and this item will require a motion.
All right, thank you, Andy. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Sure. Craig Anderson, through the chair, would like to make a motion to approve the committee recommendations for approval or denial of the courses and instructors.
Okay, thank you. The motion has been made. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. Debbie, will you please do the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Molly Keller.
Aye.
Thank you, Molly. Got your voice this time. Melissa Gett?
Aye.
Thank you. Corey Fraser?
Aye.
Thanks. Craig Anderson?
Aye.
Thank you. And Chair Travis Argue.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the motion passes.
Okay. All right, next up is the late submission. Mr. Andy Boulton, like to talk about this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andy Boulton, Senior Policy Advisor with the Division. The Division received a late submission of a request to extend renewal and continuing education requirements from Mr. Jerrold Henderson. Mr. Henderson's requests and supporting documentation are included in the late submission version of your board packet. Additionally, a copy of the relevant rule language, OAR 918-030-0240, renewal extension for hardship or illness, is also included in your board packet. Finally, we have Mr. Graham Roney, the licensing manager from the division, here in case the division has any licensing specific questions that he can answer that would help the board in its determination. With the permission of the board, Mr. Henderson is here today to present his request to the board, and this item will ultimately require a motion.
All right, thank you, Andy. Is there any questions that would like to be brought forth before we talk about a motion? Would Mr. Graham Roney like to talk or speak before?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, my name is Graham Roney. I'm the licensing manager for the Building Codes Division. The only thing I would like to say is I did have a chance to read Mr. Henderson's letter for request of hardship for illness. And looking at the circumstances, I would recommend that we do approve his request for hardship. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, who would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right, go ahead, Melissa.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the finding that the hardship that Mr. Henderson experienced warrants an extension of continuing education and licensing renewal requirements.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. Debbie, will you please do the roll?
Yes, sir. Molly Keller?
Aye.
Melissa Gett?
Aye.
Corey Fraser?
Aye.
Craig Anderson?
Aye.
And Chair Travis Argue.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you. There is no agenda items. Number 8.
Mr. Chair?
Agenda.
Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jerry
Go
Hendrickson
ahead.
is connected. I
Oh.
don't know whether he'd like to speak or not.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I'd welcome him.
Well, at this point, just to say thank you to you all. I appreciate taking the time to review my request.
We hope you have a healthy recovery. That's important. These things are set up for that. So, all right. Thank you. We are at the adjournment. We will call adjournment at 10 o'clock.